So it is. That clock's
I just wanted to say something real quick. I just want to welcome everyone to our 4th production. And tonight's a little bit different due to the strict lockdown rules. We're connecting from 3 locations. And I just want to thank everyone in advance if we have any technical difficulty. Neil, thank you for handling the tech. He should be able to fix things pretty quickly. It just might take a bit of patience. I wanted to thank our members. It's your dues that allow us to be able to provide these productions, and we're really looking forward to the future, to when we can one day have live events, and we can only do that with member contributions. A big thank you to Mike, Sarah, and Julia for your time tonight and for prepping all the material for this production this evening. And I want to let everyone know that if you have a question, you can save it for the end. And if you have your cursor on the screen, you should see a chat icon at the lower middle of your screen. And that's where you can type in your question. And that's it. On with the show. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike and Sarah, so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Give us, I want to say an expose, but that's not quite what it is. To give us a peek behind the scenes of your day jobs, let us know what you do. So, Sarah, I was going to ask you to go right back to the beginning and tell us how you decided on taking up the flute. I assume that you were quite a little girl when you started.
I was very little, yes. I was about 10 years old. I played the recorder from age 6 or so. I was lucky in those days. The school music, there was quite a lot of music in schools. You could join recorder groups in primary school, which I did. I think the teacher left. I think I ended up conducting that. I think I was a bit precocious. But age 10, I wanted to play the flute. My friend up the road was playing the clarinet, so I wanted to go and join the wind band at the Saturday morning music thing that was going on at York at that time. They had peripatetic teachers available. I had lessons both at school and privately, and whizzed along with the flute. I took to it quite well. I'd always been playing the recorder, so it came quite easily. And
I'm interested to hear that you had lessons at school and
yes,
with a different teacher privately.
Well, yes. I started off at school, but I quickly realised that it was 15-20 minutes lesson, and I was getting really keen. So my dad paid for me to go to. It was another peripatetic teacher. There were no teachers at that time that actually specialised in the flute. They tended to be either clarinets or oboes who doubled a bit, and so I didn't learn properly from a flute player until I found myself. Well, I was about age 14. I wrote to the first flute of the Halley Orchestra, who in those days was Roger Rostron, and I asked if I could have lessons with him. I'd already joined the Yorkshire Youth Orchestra by then, and a couple of the people in the orchestra said, "Oh, he's a very good teacher as well." So he took me on, and I had lessons at Sheffield when they used to do concerts, and that got me going from grade 8 onwards. But I got
because I know that your parents weren't very keen about you going into the business. Is that right? No. But at this time, they must have supported you. You know, you must be to be grade 8 when you're in your mid-teens is pretty.
Well, I have to say the exams were probably a bit easier in those days. I've looked at the grade 8 syllabus, the current ones, and I think, my goodness, it's a lot harder now. But no, I worked hard. I enjoyed it, and it came reasonably easy. My parents did help me, giving me lifts to, although eventually I took the train to Sheffield, but they started sort of digging the heels in a bit when I got to about 15, but it was sort of a bit of a pull between school and flute playing. And I took a job in a local hotel kitchen for 2 days a week, Saturdays and Sundays, in the still room, doing the coffees and teas and so on. And that paid me enough, that got me enough money to pay for my own flute lessons. I was pretty independent too at that point.
Wow.
So they would have helped, but I didn't want to be sort of pushing them because they were a little bit iffy about it. But,
yeah. And what was the music that you loved then? Did you fall in love with it all, the flute repertoire, or playing the flute, or band music?
I loved all music. I loved orchestral music the most. When I found myself in the Yorkshire Youth Orchestra, sadly, I don't think that runs still. But the joy of playing things like Sibelius and Tchaikovsky symphonies and so on.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry about this.
Quadruped interloper.
Yeah. Before we got rid of them, but it was just so exciting. There was quite a lot of amateur music in the city as well. I fell in love with the Bach, the Passions. We used to do those every year in the Minster, and I started off on second flute to a more experienced amateur flute player, and I worked my way up to being first. And I remember playing every year the Matthew Passions and St John Passions that they did, that were conducted by the Minster organist, and that was the first time I'd worked with professional singers. They had the amateur Minster choir, of course, but they always had professional solo singers, and that was really exciting. I think that gave me the taste for playing with singers and playing opera that I ended up doing.
And you've got I'm thinking of Ausliebe, of course, from the flute aria from the Matthew Passion, and that's the texture is so thin. It's you and a singer and a bass.
Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous, that one. Yes, I love that. I love Bach. I mean, I liked all of it, but it was all very exciting. And I began to feel that's the way I wanted to go.
Mike, you're a slightly different kettle of fish, because your parents were both music teachers, weren't they?
Yeah, I was very lucky. They were both music teachers. Dad was a bandsman before he became a teacher. He was in the Coldstream Guards. So he was playing the trombone all the time. So, yeah, I was able to start when I was very young. Yeah, I was very lucky. I was very lucky. Music was in the house all the time.
Yeah.
And they were very encouraging, even though they really thought it was a proper job.
Oh, they must have been so proud. So as a kid, you were playing in brass bands a lot, were you?
Yeah. No, I mean, I played...
Sorry about that.
Sorry about the cat. Dad encouraged me to do everything, jazz, classical, bands, everything, for him, it was just, you should enjoy yourself, have as much fun as possible, not be sort of typecast. So, I was very lucky. And I had a music scholarship to go to a school as well. So, and I was surrounded by it. And music in schools, there was a lot of music in the schools at that time, particularly in my area. There were youth orchestras, bands and jazz bands and things. So and I was able to take advantage of all of that.
And you rose through the grades.
Yes.
And then so tell us what happened in 1978, because
there was a certain competition that started in 1978. The BBC started, the Young Musician of the Year competition, and I'd seen this leaflet in the school, and I took it home to show Mum and Dad, and they said, "Well, have a go." And I thought, "Oh no, it's just too many people. I can't really do this." I said, "Well, just have a go. I mean, we had to do auditions and God knows what, and then it accelerated very quickly. I suddenly found that I was in the quarterfinals and then the semi-finals, and then I won the brass class. There were 4 classes at that time. And then there was a sort of grand final. And I mean, to have got that far, I was quite pleased, I thought, well,
you wouldn't have expected to win at that point.
No.
Because it would be a trombone, really, I guess.
And I was competing against pianists and there was a cellist and a clarinet. And I thought, well, that's it. At least I get to play a concerto on TV. So, and scary, but it was great fun. But then the biggest shock was that one.
Brilliant. Because I remember, I think I was a kid, and I remember there was quite a big hoo-ha. It was the first BBC Young Musician of the Year. And I remember, anyway, we have the most gorgeous, adorable clip. Which Neil, we can see this clip of Mike hearing his one.
The award of £300 and the trophy, the very handsome trophy you see there, BBC Television's Young Musician of this year, 1978, should go to Mr. Michael Hext.
portrait of a happy young trombonist, absolutely flabbergasted. The jury must have chosen him because of his maturity and his unflappability and all-round musicianship. Actually, I think he made more fluffs than any others. He was pushing his technique to the limit.
Oh, I love it. I love it. But what I love is you're so assured. You're just
Yes.
made to be on stage.
Oh
this
God,
immense
the confidence of
assurance.
youth. The confidence of youth.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd
And
be terrified. I'd be terrified if I had to do that now.
isn't it weird? You'd think that things would get easier. You'd think you'd get braver. It just goes the
No,
other way,
no.
doesn't it? No matter how much experience you have. Oh, I love that clip though. Gorgeous. So so Sarah, we'll come back to what happened after that, Mike. But Sarah, so how did you come to go to music college?
Well, I enjoyed school actually, and I did all right. But the pools were happening, and I thought, well, I'll take a year out and think about it. I worked in the local music shop in York, Banks Music Shop, and played in all the amateur things I could find. And I tried for music college and university. I was offered a place at the second choice university, but I got into my first choice music college. So I thought, I'll go with that. And by that time, I'd had some good experiences in the amateur music world. I actually think I played in one of the very first ad hoc performances of John Eliot Gardiner's, because his sister lived near York and her husband was a keen amateur clarinet player. He was also a surgeon at the hospital, I think. And they used to organise musical weekends, and John Eliot Gardiner would come and conduct there, and they get together as many local musicians as they could. And for a weekend, we sit there with a small glass of beer by the music stand and play through music. And he was basically practicing. He'd not, at that stage, he wasn't a conductor. He was about 27, 28, I'd say. And I think he had a choir. I think probably just forming the Monteverdi Singers, I don't know, but he was just sort of testing the water really and doing some orchestral work. But I hadn't come across him at all, but they were a lovely atmosphere, and we played some really lovely music. Dunbarth Notes by Stravinsky comes to mind, and accompanied a Bruch violin concerto. There were various things. It had me so excited. I remember thinking, that's it. I'm going to try and do this. I had a plan B, but I having got into the Guildhall School, at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, I decided to have a go for it. And if things went wrong, I would rethink. And you know, if I hadn't got a job within about 2 years after college, I thought then I must maybe think again.
Go get a proper job.
So we compromised. The parents compromised.
So how long were you at Guildhall for?
4 years. Yes, I did the whole 4 years. It was a 3-year course then, and I did a year's postgrad.
Yeah.
Again, picking up what ensemble playing I could, because I enjoyed that. Some people just wanted to play solos and things, but I was quite keen to play with chamber music. And I got a few trials. I didn't get anywhere with those, but lots of good suggestions. And after a year of sort of freelancing teaching after college, I got a date for the summer season with Max Jaffers Orchestra, the Spa Orchestra as it was. It's still going, and he's sadly deceased, but that was around about 1980, 1981, I think that was. And that was playing twice a day at Scarborough Seaside. I took a little flat there, and we played in the morning on the sun terrace looking out towards the sea in all weathers, and people turned up whether it was raining or not. They put their umbrellas up. They were a really hardy bunch. And in the evening at the Grand Hall, I think it's called, there was a big concert. I remember we had to try and wear a different evening dress, the ladies, every night. So
you were semi outside, were you?
We were outside in the mornings, under a slight shelter, but mostly outside. We had those big metal pegs to hold the music down. Yeah. We played through a heck of a lot of repertoire. Only one rehearsal for the entire season. And that was just to get the first concert underway. And then it was up to you to learn the music as you went.
Yeah.
It was terrifying, but really, really good for you.
Exactly. It's a great rehearsal studio for going into the biz, isn't it? Because when you go into an orchestra, especially if it's for sessions, jingles, adverts, whatever. You don't see the music before, do you? And even when
Really
you go
fun.
in to play a symphony, I guess you know what it is. But Major has a story that he remembers the first time he came across you was with the LSO.
Was he on that one? Yeah.
And when there was a very hard advert, and you'd come in as a young Depp in your early 20s, I guess, and,
Something like that, yeah.
and it was all about the flute, and there you were, kind of launched into this incredibly hard day with all these hardened old nasties around. And he said,
I think I was struggling really, but if he remembers it, I got away with it.
He remembers you absolutely flying, and he said that was when he remembers it being a wow session, because you sailed and you won the respect of your colleagues there, and he thinks that's Major's fantasy, is that then that's really when you arrived and took off. And, yeah. And then how did you end up at the Opera House? You were with the LSO for a bit.
Well, I started off still up in Yorkshire. I got a job with Opera North for nearly 4 years, actually, which I loved. It was both doing symphony orchestra work and playing for the opera, and we did quite a lot of operas. But a job came up in English National Opera, and I applied for it. And to my astonishment, I was offered it. I really was surprised. And a year later, the job at the Royal Opera came up, which was just down the road. And I thought, oh, what the hell? I mean, it was going quite well at English National Opera. I enjoyed it. There's flexibility, lovely wind section, really nice people. But the Royal Opera, I suppose, I thought I may as well go for that. And I did. And very luckily got that. And that's where I sort of ended and spent the next 30 odd years.
You had a year as principal flute at the LSO, hadn't you?
Yes, that happened whilst I was at the Opera House, actually.
Oh,
I actually went in as a dep, not actually on a really hard piece. Well, it was hard in a different way. I deputised in a Brahms symphony and something else. I think the piano concerto. I had to sight read because I didn't know it. I went in to cover somebody, and after that they put me on trial. And when I've been at the Opera House for about 2 years. And I've been enjoying myself there, and it was just by accident that the LSO sort of offered me this work, and then at the end of it they said, "Well, do you think you might be interested in a job?" And I thought, "Oh, blimey, I really wasn't expecting it." So I did that for a bit, but it brought home to me. I'd not properly freelanced, as in going all over the country as people do, and traveling a lot, and to have that experience of traveling, living out of a suitcase for weeks, sometimes even months on end, as they were doing, I found it really, really hard. I was just about keeping on top of play because by that time, because you don't have any time to practice. It's that sort of gone. You're really sort of up against learning a lot of music in a hurry, and the traveling. And it's not like being in a place and having a nice holiday, because you can't, it's the lovely places, Canary Islands in January was really quite lovely, but you actually had to play a concert every night for a week. So you couldn't go out and enjoy yourself really.
This was all in your 20s?
Yes, it's all, yes. I was about 30 when I was in the LSO.
Well, we should just say that the LSO is I mean, the LSO is. I shouldn't ask you to pick favourites, but the LSO has always seemed to me to be the massive orchestra, the really.
Well, I think yes, I think all the 4 London orchestras are really utterly amazing, and in different ways. The London Symphony Orchestra perhaps had a great reputation at that time, particularly having done the Star Wars music and some of the big films that they did. And a certain sort of bit of a swagger about them, were the LSO, which I quite enjoyed as well. It's quite fun. But
to be principal flute of the LSO,
I was sort of co-principal. There was a slightly more senior principal there as well, Paul Edmund Davis. But it was a wonderful experience.
Was Star Wars before your time?
It was before my time, unfortunately. Yes, yes, they'd all enjoyed that very much.
Well, we've got. Okay, so you go to the LSO. Oh, there is the Bernstein. What happened with that? Was LSO. We've got to hear about
That was in
Bernstein.
yeah, that one. Well, this was a tour throughout Germany. We were playing, it's about, I think it was nearly 2 weeks tour, and different places every night again. And Leonard Bernstein, a fantastic musician, conducting mostly his own pieces. Paul Edmund Davis was playing a big solo for the concert series. So I was in the orchestra for playing principal flute for the rest of it, because, you know, he was up on stage doing a wonderful solo that I think, I'm not sure Bernstein might have actually written that for him. I'm not too sure about that, but anyway, I think he was giving the premiere or near premiere of it. And the thing with Leonard Bernstein at the end of these amazing performances, he raised the principal players up on their feet, and he grabbed hold of the leader of the orchestra, who's a lovely man, and smother him with kisses, and the same thing to the principal cello. I think it's Douglas Cummings in those days. And then he started striding across the orchestra. It didn't happen straight away, but he strided across the orchestra, grab hold of me, get me off my feet. And I was always embarrassed when they did this, actually, and smother me in very slobbery kisses. I mean, really, you had no choice about it. I was nearly dropping my flute, and he did the same to the oboe. And eventually he managed to grab hold of the bassoonist, who was Martin Gatt in those days, and haul him off the stand and do the same to him. It was getting so much, I was getting a bit sort of worried about it all. And eventually I saw him at an airport. He came over to ask me how it was going, because I was a new member and so on, and we were just chatting. And I said, and by the way, I feel a little bit British about this, but I'm a bit reserved, and it would have been perhaps nicer if you didn't show quite so much appreciation. And I can't remember exactly how I put it. I was being very sort of like I am sometimes. And he was so nice about it. He was really, really nice. He said, "Oh, of course you are British. I understand. You know, I can't do his accent." And the next night, he kissed the leader and the cellist as well. But he threw a bunch of red roses at the woodwind players, all the section actually. And we were very, very pleased with that. I thought that was a very stylish gesture.
So anyway, you go on to the Royal Opera House, and we've got another clip. We should apologise for if the videos are stilted. Hopefully the audio will be fine, but the videos might be a bit glitchy. So we've got a clip of Norma by Bellini from the Royal Opera House. A sumptuous looking production, and this aria, the introduction to Casta Diva, is a big flute solo, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And this is one of yours. So Neil, let's hear this one. Ah, beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. So Mike, coming back to you, what happened after, did the young musician launch you into music college, or did you have a bit more?
It did, yeah. I mean, I was still at school, so, you know, there wasn't an awful lot going to happen particularly quickly, but I got a scholarship to go to the Royal College. I had a great time there, but I didn't finish the course, not because I didn't think it was particularly good. I did, I really enjoyed it, but I was offered a job. I mean, and you know, I was offered a job in a Halley orchestra. So, you know, having a job as a musician is a very rare commodity.
What were they doing offering a student a job? How did that
I know, exactly. That's what I told them, but they didn't listen. So I got this job, and so yeah, I was 21. So I went up to Manchester for a year, and then there was a job went in the London Philharmonic Orchestra, the same job that I had. So I went for that job, and then I was offered that. So yeah.
So when you say the same job that you had, do you mean principal?
Yeah.
So you were a student and you went to be principal trombone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm doing your thing now. Yeah. You can actually, Neil, would you put the still up of we just going back to the young musician, because there's these on the back of that, I guess it was a spin-off. There are these, we came across these, and
oh no.
so this is presumably they wanted to use, you know, it was a big thing, this young musician, and I saw this magazine, I can't remember who gave it to us, and I thought, oh great, there'll be an article about Mike in here, and I looked through and there's nothing. It's just an advert. It's just they're using this, you know, they're using your Young Musician of the Year thing to advertise their trombones, con trombones. But
yes, that's right. Yeah.
Did you get, I mean, presumably that's why the Halley knew about you, or did you go up and audition?
Yeah, I mean, I had to audition. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to do that. I mean, in fairness to everybody else who applies, you have to do it. But I mean, yeah, undoubtedly it helps if, you know, people know who you are.
Yeah.
They have a preconceived idea of who you are. So yeah, no, it does help a lot.
Yeah.
Did you get a trombone out of that advertising?
I did, yes.
Oh, good.
And I lost it.
And you lost it.
I lost it.
Oh, that's a story.
That's another story, yeah.
So you were with the LPO, the London Philharmonic Orchestra.
Yeah, that was a great job. I mean, actually, it was doing that job I first fell in love with Sussex, because we used to do Glyndebourne Festival Opera every summer. So I'd spend 3.5 months down here. So no, that was great. And the job itself was fantastic, because you got the best of both worlds. There were great conductors, a lot of touring. But I mean, at that age, I mean, I loved it. You know, we went, we did big tours to Japan, Far East, Australia, America, Europe. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Right. So that was basically through your 20s you had that job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we've got a clip coming up of this is the LPO playing The Ride of the Valkyries with Tenstedt, and tell us about Tenstedt.
Well, this Klaus Tenstedt was a German conductor who was absolutely fantastic. I mean, we used to call him Tense State, because I mean, he was very emotional and slightly mercurial. But when he was on form, I mean, he was absolutely fantastic. I mean, this clip you're about to hear was the end of a 6-week tour we did to the Far East, Hong Kong, Japan. And it was right at the end of the tour. So, I mean, everybody was exhausted. And we arrived at this hall called the Suntory Hall in Tokyo. And it was hot. It was so hot. And when the camera lights went, and everybody felt exhausted. But it was just one of those funny things about, you know, being a musician. There was suddenly this tremendous atmosphere. He just came on stage, and you could see it in his face that he just wanted us to really go for it, you know. And you can hear it in this clip. It's absolutely wonderful.
Great. Here we go. Great.
Amazing.
Really energetic.
Yeah.
You're right. So I hardly recognised you there.
I used to have hair.
Yes, the hair, and but
It was
also
a long time ago.
you're in the middle. You've got
I'm in
trombone.
the middle. Yes, yeah.
But
Yeah,
you
there was
but you were
somebody on the end.
but you're the section leader, right?
Yeah, yeah. The chap on the end was playing bass trumpet as well as trombone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bumping, is it called bumping?
Yeah,
Chris played
bumping. Bumping. Yeah, we
Right,
call it.
Tell us about bumping, because that was a new concept for me. I would.
Bumping's when you need a bit of help. Really. Some of those programs are really heavy on the face, so
Yeah.
sometimes if you have a bumper, it just helps you a little bit, take it off the face a bit.
Are you? Are you allowed to request a bumper, or is it? Are there some pieces where there'll always be an extra?
It depends on the money, really. But no, we had somebody there playing bass trumpet, so he bumped when he wasn't playing bass trumpet, so
God,
that worked out okay.
Did you get a double fee?
You sound like an orchestral musician.
What I'm thinking is that the bumper, when you've got, because there were 5 there are 2 bass trombones in that
It's
one.
2 bass trombones, a contrabass trombone and a bass trombone. Yeah.
So there are 5, and you'd think that a bumper could maybe just move along the section for whoever needs help. But the bumper just belongs to the primary, the leader, right? Or
Yeah.
whoever has the solo.
Yeah, yeah.
Funny. So then,
When you play, sorry, is it when you play louder and then you've got to play something on your own later, so you've got some lip to.
Yeah.
If you're playing a really loud bit before, I mean, we don't have bumpers on the flutes at all, unfortunately. But if there's a very loud bit coming up, like, there's a solo coming up and a really loud bit, then I get my other colleagues to play a bit louder, and I might just take a breath, just take a little rest, and then play. I mean, it's a bit easier to do with the woodwinds, but in Mike's case, you know, you'd certainly hear it as a trombone stopped in the Valkyrie at least. You know.
Yes, yeah.
Just,
Because it gets tight.
It's
really tired, doesn't it, around your?
Yes,
your
yes.
It does, yeah. I mean, that was a whole program of Wagner,
Yes.
just the
Just
orchestral
Wagner,
section. So, I mean, yeah, it is. And with that conductor, I mean, he didn't take prisoners. He didn't want anybody coasting. He wanted it full on all the time. It was a great atmosphere, but very hard work.
Yes, yeah. And you can hear actually the focus, the dots, the rhythm is so tight.
Yeah.
Well, it couldn't be any other way, could it? And then, so you went from, after 10 years, you went from the LPO to the Opera House.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the job came up 92, I think, at the Opera House, and they offered it to me, and I wasn't quite sure, but it was a much more civilized job. There was a lot less traveling, a lot less work, and it sort of gave me a chance to do other things as well. I was able to do sort of commercial work, session work, films, TVs, things like that. So yeah, it gave me a chance to do a bit of everything. And because I was always in London, I was always available to do these sessions, whereas when I was in the Philharmonic, I was on tour a lot. So if any work came up, you just weren't free, you know. But when I was at the Royal Opera, yeah, I was free, so I had the chance to do all this different work. It's fantastic. Yeah.
And how long after you'd been there did you meet Sarah? Because Sarah was already there, wasn't she?
Yeah. Well, it was pretty early on, wasn't it? But yeah. There was a piece, because normally the brass and the woodwind sit on the opposite sides of the pit, but there was a piece, a Britain piece, Death in Venice.
Death in Venice,
yeah. And the brass was sitting behind the winds. So yeah, we
went in and out the same door, because otherwise you go in and out separate doors and often don't really coincide. We sort of met a few times in the pub, but
yeah. God, not a very auspicious, not a very auspicious title to meet over, is it?
No, it isn't. No, it wasn't the most cheerful of pieces. No. We had to cheer ourselves up in the pub afterwards.
Yeah, oh well, that's how it happened. So when you as we've just heard, that real feeling of being a section in the trombones, when as leader, you went in as leader of the section. So what are your duties? Would you rehearse the section to get to kind of sectional sound?
Yeah, occasionally you would do that. I mean, I think a lot of it's sort of instinctive, really. I mean, as a section principal,
Mm.
you as well as sort of leading the section musically, you have to be a bit of a people person as well. But I mean, a lot of it really is just instinct. Really, it's something that's a bit difficult to describe to people if they're not musicians. But
Yes.
there's a lot of instinct. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you sort of think, well, you know, musicians need a beat to be able to play, but actually, it's not always the case. Sometimes I've done things where we've done kids' concerts and the conductor's walked off to make the point, well, this is what happens is if I leave, you know, and then actually it makes no difference. Conductor could walk away and the orchestra still plays with this extraordinary ability to be able to commune with each other.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to define, but yeah.
And with the trombones particularly, it's such a homogenous sound through it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You really do, you're like a chord, you're like a single chord together.
Yeah.
So I guess you're really attuned anyway
Yeah.
to the way you're playing.
Yeah.
So we've got another clip. Talking of conductors, was it this one? Was this the Zubin Mehta?
Oh, this is a clip that I think we're both on actually, from the end of the first act of Tosca. I mean, this particular version is Bryn Terfel, Tony Papanicolaou conducting. But when I first went to the Opera House, and Sarah was on this as well, we did a fantastic production, Zeffirelli production, with an all-star cast. It was, Pavarotti was doing Cavaradossi, and Katia Ricciarelli was doing Tosca. I think Justina Diaz was doing Scarpia. Zubin Mehta was conducting, as a wonderful conductor. And this scene you're about to see and hear, he went to give a big downbeat. I mean, it's a fantastic dramatic moment. And he went to give a big downbeat, brought his arm back, and he whacked the pit wall between the orchestra and the audience. And his baton flew into the audience, and which wouldn't have been so bad. He could have carried on. He said that he couldn't move his arm. He'd actually numbed his arm. So we did the whole of this scene with him conducting with his head, with his arm. I mean, he was very apologetic when he came off. Bless him. You know, he said, "I'm so sorry. I just couldn't move my arm." You know. But yeah, it was a memorable moment. But that didn't happen in the bit you're about to hear. Otherwise, you'd see the band flying in the air. Yeah.
All right, so we've got Bryn Terfel now with the Opera House at the Opera House Orchestra, and again, you get a real trombone hit with this clip. Thank you, Neil. Yay. Actually, to conduct that with your head would be quite hard. There's quite a lot going on there. Brilliant. Great. So Sarah, at the Opera House, it's not just opera that you play, is it? You're with the ballet as well.
Yes, 50% of the work is for the Royal Ballet, actually, I think. And when I first joined, I'd never played ballet before. As a busy freelancer, it comes up a lot, but I'd not come across the main repertoire. It didn't come up at college either. So I dived into Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and learned the incredibly hard flute writing in that. I believe Tchaikovsky played the flute, probably among other instruments, but it was written, yeah, very notey stuff. And I practiced and got to the first orchestra rehearsal and realised that the speeds were completely different from both the metronome marks and the sort of musical indications, allegretto, etc. Some of the fast bits went much faster than I was expecting. And some of the slow, sort of gentle ones went really slowly because some of the dancers needed a lot more time. But I also learned as I progressed, as I got to know the job better, that when each dancer comes along, they'll dance at different speeds, slightly. They'll make slightly different movements. And my theory, and I think it's right, is that the taller dancers, and the two very tall ones in those days, Darcy Bussell and Sylvie Graham, take a bit longer to uncurl their long limbs and to do so gracefully to fit the choreography in, I think. Its choreography is always the same for the dancers. It was quite interesting working occasionally with Russian conductors because they were used to working with, say, the Bolshoi or the Kirov ballet companies. And I got the impression that it must be completely different choreography because they'd start off at very different speeds and they'd play things completely differently. And then they'd rehearse with the ballet dancers and realise it had to be quite different for the Royal Ballet.
Now that is a skill, whatever you say, conducting, to really get the tempo right for the
to get the tempo, exactly. And it has to be right. When they do, I'm not very good with all those terms. Is it fouette, the thing where she twirls around when she's dancing? Is it Odette or in Swan Lake? The ballet dancer does this incredible twirling thing, whatever they call it. That's going to be the right speed, and certain other things, you know, their twists and turns and the way they has to be caught. And I think ballet conductors tend to specialize again. It's very movement based. They follow the movement that they see, and it's very precise for them.
And then you really have to put your hands in the, I know sometimes, because when you're in the pit, you can't see what's going on stage, can you?
No, not at all.
You with singers you can hear a little bit, but with dancers you absolutely have to trust the conductor. You've got no choice.
No choice.
Only the conductor that can see.
Yes,
so we've got a little clip now featuring you, which I'm sure everybody will recognise. Perhaps you'd like to introduce it, Sarah.
Well, it's the Dance of the Mirliton, I think, which I can never play without thinking of the fruit and nut advert, you know, the Cadbury's fruit and nut thing. Frank Muir it was, wasn't it? Yes. I've always got that going on in my head when I'm playing it sometimes. It's hard not to think of that one. Anyway, it's the Dance of the Mirliton with the Royal Opera.
Beautiful. Hey, roll on Christmas.
Next Christmas it'll be there, I'm sure.
Gorgeous. So as well as the Opera House Mike, as you said, you both have done film sessions. Tell us about the process of recording a film score.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not widely known, but many of the big film soundtracks are recorded in this country. the big composers, Ennio Morricone, John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, James Horner, Hans Zimmer. I mean, they all come to London to record the soundtracks. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I was very lucky to be involved in a lot of that. I think the first one I did, I think, was The Mission. I don't know whether people know The Mission. Ennio Morricone, that's it, yeah. But then, once I went to the Royal Opera, I had time to do other things. And yeah, I worked with John Williams. I did the Return of the Jedi, when they did the DVD remake of it. Did Harry Potter. Lots and lots of films. And a fantastic experience. It used to be when we did films that you'd have the whole orchestra in the studio, and the composer would conduct, and you'd have the film projected behind you. I mean, it's a fantastic experience because if you weren't playing, you could just have a quick look, see what was going on, you know. And it was up to the composer to make sure everything fitted together. And so you sort of felt part of the creative experience, you know. It was wonderful stuff. But the clip that we're about to see is from Gladiator, the film Gladiator, which was a composer called Hans Zimmer. And the reason that I remember this one so well is because it was the first time that they'd stopped having the whole orchestra in the studio. They would have, say, just the brass section. And it was a massive brass section. They just wanted noise, you know, for all those battle scenes. So there was 16 horns, 8 trombones, 5 trumpets or something like that. And also it was the beginning, it was about the time when they started doing CGI in films. So, you know, the computer generated images that they used to have, because they recreated the Colosseum, didn't they, for Gladiator? And because we didn't have the screen behind us anymore, we had to play to a sort of computerized track. So between takes, we would just sit in the studio or just go and have a cup of tea while they were listening back. But I remember somebody running out and saying, you've got to come in the soundbox and have a listen to this take and just see, because we could see it on the small screens in the soundbox, of course. And it was the section where I think they're in the middle of the Colosseum and there are tigers jumping out from underground.
Yeah.
And it was amazing because the CGI wasn't quite finished. It looked like drawings that were just jumping out of the ground like ghostly tigers. It was fantastic, but a fantastic experience and a great score. The only problem was because we didn't really get to hear the score while we were doing it, because we only heard our own bit. We'd had the rest of the orchestra in the headphones, and it was all computerized. But it's a great score.
Before they'd done the string recording, they just had a computerized version of the.
Oh, that's right. Yes, yeah. What they tend to do is they record the track on synthesizer, just so they can make the film and fit the track with. Which
is not a very nice sound to hear. Actually, it's not quite the same. You know, it's not a real orchestra, but it gives you an idea. And additionally, you play with a click. And it has to be precisely on a click. That's very hard. Yeah, for many players.
But fortunately, they still want live musicians, which is good news for us, really.
All on a computer. God, that must be really disconcerting, having a sort
not
of
great
synthesized thing so close to your ears, because it's not like that.
That's right.
Because you've got to hear that and your own sound. I mean, it's very difficult. If you can't hear that, you can't play in time. But if you can't hear your own sound, you don't know quite precisely if you're in tune or not, or if you're, you know. That's it's a very demanding job, actually. I did very little of it myself, but it's hard.
Well, now we've got Gladiator, so in this you'll hear this big wall of brass sound, and there are strings. I know there's the boiling kettle strings at the top, but there are strings in the mix as well. So this is the mix, the final mix, obviously. Okay, let's hear this. great, rousing stuff.
Mm,
It's actually so smooth, the mix. The orchestra sound, it almost is too perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
It's,
Yeah, I think the reason why they do it like that is because the sound engineers, they like to have complete control
Yes.
over the final product. You know, I mean, just the reason that I don't like doing it so much anymore is you don't really sort of feel part of the creative process. It's a bit like sort of music by numbers, really.
Mm.
I mean, the end result's still fantastic, but you know, for a lot of musicians, the buzz is doing almost like the live thing. So when you've got a whole orchestra together, you know, there's that instinct and you're used to playing together. The idea of just listening to everybody on one side of a headphone is always a bit difficult, really. But I mean, but the end result is fantastic.
Yes, it really is. And Sarah, have you got any kind of jingles or adverts that we?
No, I haven't really done jingles as such, but I do have one memory of a film I recorded with the London Symphony Orchestra, because it was, I think it's the first time I did it on my own without Paul Edmund Davis being there, and he'd be on first flute if that was the case, but I was the first flute on this. So it's called Summer Story. I can't remember the name of the British actress who was playing it. Anyway, they recorded several different versions of some of the love scenes, and they were recording for different markets, and it got us very amused because we couldn't see it at that time. Even then, it wasn't until you actually went into the box that you could actually see it with the film. And they encouraged you to do that so you know what's going on. But there was a huge queue of people trying to get in the box at one stage, because some of the versions of the love scene had the girl with her top very exposed and everything out, and other versions they would sort of be rather demurely sort of the bodice wasn't ripped open. It was just sort of because of the different markets. There were different countries they were going to sell it to, so there were certain different sorts of levels of decorum, but we had to do sort of several versions of each one, and they recorded the music separately for each scene that they'd done. So as I say, the actors had rehearsed and performed, recorded the film with these different various levels of undressing in the scene. I thought that was quite interesting, and it certainly had all the lads going up into the box, as you can imagine, to see how many clothes you're taking off this time.
The lads. Brilliant. Well, we've just about come to the end of our time, and if there are any questions that our viewers and listeners, we've got one maybe has come up here. I can put them to you. Okay, so here we go. Jen says, when recording for a blockbuster, do you get invited to the film premiere?
No, well, no, not to the premiere. No, they tend to have a big sort of post soundtrack party. So there's been a few of those. Yeah, quite lavish affairs.
I never heard about those.
Oh no, they definitely do. Usually at the studio, but yeah, no, there's no expense spared really.
Was there nothing? Did you not attend that one with Stephen Hawkins? Was that something else?
Oh yes, yeah. There was. I played on the score to Interstellar. That was Hans Zimmer as well.
Yes.
And as well as recording the soundtrack, we also did a concert performance of it. So at the Albert Hall. So we were on stage, and there was a huge screen behind us. And it's funny because I actually saw the film. I was behind the screen, so I saw the film backwards. Tried to work out the subtitles, but yeah. No, there was a big party for that.
Was a big party with all the celebrities.
They had all the celebs were there. Michael Caine was there. And Stephen Hawking. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Did you hobnob with the stars?
Yeah. Wouldn't quite go so say that.
So we've got another question here. What's happening at the Opera House during the pandemic?
Well, you know more than me. There've been some galas. I mean, I'm not there anymore, but Mike was involved in some galas, some streamed performances where they record it. Right now, nothing at the moment.
No, it's pretty.
There are some plans. They've recorded a piece by Poulenc.
Yeah, there's a piece by Poulenc called The Human Voice they recorded last week, but it's only involving very small numbers of players.
Yeah, and that'll be performed on streaming, I think, at some point. And there are some plans for, was it a smaller version of Don Giovanni and what was the other thing?
Bohème, a small version of Bohème.
but
But,
without full forces, probably
Yeah.
without statements and
Right,
things.
and presumably without without the full audience as well.
yes,
Probably
yeah,
not,
just
no,
streamed.
no,
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
streamed.
yeah.
Yes.
Because
I mean,
the-
sadly, we've lost a lot of players and staff. It's
Is
the
it
only
about-
way to stay above
yeah,
water. Really,
20% cut,
we've lost
isn't
about
there?
20%
Yeah.
of the
So,
staff.
maybe
so,
more in other departments. Actually,
yeah,
the
yeah.
orchestra was relatively
Yeah.
lightly cut.
I think we lost about 20 jobs in the orchestra. So it's all a bit devastating, really. I mean, we just, like a lot of people, we're all in the same boat, worse than anybody else. But we're just hoping for things to go back to
We're
normal.
hoping to start.
Perhaps in the autumn. I think in the autumn they're looking to try and start a new season. So
Yes. It may not be
Fingers
full
crossed.
forces until for a while. I don't. They don't know.
we just don't know.
don't
at the moment.
Okay, so we've got several questions here. There's a question, Mike, about your love of jazz, but when did that start? But maybe we'll put that to one side because it may be that we have Mike back on a kind of more of a jazzy platform. But Nicola says, if you could play only one piece for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
Figaro, I think. Marriage of Figaro. I once did about 23 performances of that with a wonderful conductor, and Bernard Haitink conducting, and some wonderful singers. I don't remember which ones they were at the moment, but Felicity Lott, I think, was one of them. Every night, I remember thinking 23, but every night was just brilliant, and I loved every single one of them. I thought that piece doesn't wear thin. It was amazing singing and amazing conducting, I think.
Right. Oh, that's a nice answer.
So that's one.
How about you, Mike?
Ennio Puccini, really. Tosca, Madame Butterfly. I could play those.
Yes.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. You get the trombones get some good hits in those.
Yeah, but even when they're not, you've got the fun of sitting there listening to it. Especially, well, we haven't got a lot to play in Butterfly, but it's just to sit and listen to it. I find it quite difficult at the moment because we haven't done it. It's very difficult to listen to those pieces because you feel very emotional.
Quite tearful,
You've
yes.
been so attached to these pieces, and I just really we want to get back to doing it again.
Yeah.
It's so beautifully written too. It's beautiful orchestral writing, Puccini. I remember just thinking, he just puts an odd note somewhere in a part, but it just adds a little shaft of colour. It's like an impressionist painting, perhaps. Just the colour and texture of the sound, just adding a little note here and there. You might be sitting there on whatever or something, and suddenly you play a note along with the solo line of whatever's, and it just gives an expression or a colour to that particular note and word, probably, and it's beautiful stuff.
Oh well, I just had this image of you two sitting in the pit. You are surrounded by this amazing music at the highest level. We're absolutely the best, the highest quality singing and playing in the world. So we've got a big question to end on now. Jane says, such interesting lives. Is there anything you'd have done differently?
I just don't know, actually. I think it's all worked out. I was sad to leave the London Symphony Orchestra, as you say. It's a high point of people's careers, but I probably wouldn't have lasted as long there as I managed to do 30 years at the Royal Opera House. It's a very hard job, so hard, and to keep on top at that level and be so exposed. And I prefer being sort of under the stage a bit. I enjoy chamber music. I'd love to have done more of that, but that's not necessarily stopping because I've got some chamber music allies in the village, and I might hope to do a bit more chamber music playing when we eventually get freed up to do some, and so that would be nice. I still can look forward to that. But I wouldn't have done it.
No regrets at all. I
Yay.
mean, I've never thought of it as a proper job. I know people in the music business, and they talk about somebody who's not in the business. They will say, "Oh, that's so and so. He's got a proper job." It's never felt like a job to me. We've just been really lucky
so much fun
to do something we love doing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And well, see you on the dog walks.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Thanks, John. Thank you to Kendra and Neil as well. And thank you all for coming. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
I don't know if we're going to hear from Kendra again But
You can talk now.
Hi, it's Kendra. Thank you. That was wonderful. So interesting. I learned so much.
Glad you enjoyed
And
it.
I really want to thank you for your time.
Thank
That's
you.
just all.
Thank you.
Great job, Julia, also.
Yes.
Thank you.
very good.
All right. Good night, everybody.
okay,
See you
bye.
soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Cheers. Bye bye.
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 Bye.